Well, I've been using Apple products for what seems like a long time, but when you think about it in terms of how long Apple products have been here, it's probably a relatively short time. I don't date back to the old Apple IIs and such. I'm very much more, I would say, in the OS X era. I actually grew up, like a lot of people, with Windows computers and certainly played with Macs through the years, but was a relative latecomer and a relative late convert to the Mac. Well, there are a lot of things that attracted me to Apple products, not least of which is design. I mean, these are beautiful products to look at. I mean, that's something Steve Jobs famously emphasized, that this is a guy who pays attention to the aesthetic. But of course, you need more than the aesthetic. There are a lot of products that look good, and then you start to use them, and you find they're not very usable or they don't work well. These products are usable and they work well. The question I get all the time is, oh, well, I use Windows. You know, I've grown up with Windows. I have all this time and money invested in Windows. How could I possibly use a Mac? Well, there's a couple of answers to that. For one thing, you can actually these days run Windows on a Mac through what Apple calls Boot Camp, which lets you, if you have your own copy of Windows, you can actually boot up into Windows. And then there's also third-party programs such as Parallels, where you can actually run the Mac OS and Windows OS simultaneously. And that actually works pretty well. There are fewer and fewer instances where stuff you can do on a Windows machine you can't do on a Mac. I mean, common file formats, both sides. So much of computing now is done on the internet. Obviously, you can do that on a Windows machine and on a Mac. I think there are a few reasons why a lot of the Windows crowd has kind of moved over to the Apple camp. One of which is that you can do so much, or almost all of what you would do on the Windows side, internet, common file formats, you can do on the Mac. So that's one thing. The other thing is, because so many people now have iPhones and iPads and they've discovered Apple, maybe they discovered it by walking into an Apple retail store, but if not, they discovered it because, hey, guess what? There's an Apple logo on this thing called the iPad. Maybe they know something about doing pretty good computers as well. So I think people are willing to take a chance now on Macs when maybe they wouldn't do that a few years ago. Among other things, it's going to bring, actually, folks who do like the iPad environment will probably like Mountain Lion because it brings the Mac operating system that much closer to the tablet environment that a lot of people are now accustomed to. So we're starting to see, I don't want to go as far as to call it a merging of the tablet and the more traditional computer operating system, but they're certainly getting closer and closer.